God's curse for narcissists at the end of their lives. Have you ever encountered a person who constantly craves attention, one who believes that the world revolves around them? It's easy to dismiss them as simply self-centered, but there's something deeper at play. These individuals are often diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, a condition marked by an inflated sense of self-importance, a constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. While they might appear charming and confident on the surface, their internal world is fragile, and their actions can leave a trail of destruction. But what happens when their life comes to an end? What awaits narcissists in the final stages of their lives when their once glorious image begins to crack? Is there a curse that befalls them? A divine consequence for their years of manipulation and self-obsession? In this video, we will dive deep into the mindset of a narcissist, explore the potential consequences of their behavior, and discuss whether there's a divine reckoning awaiting them in their final years. Stick with us to uncover the truth. The end of a narcissist's life is not as glamorous as they might think. In fact, it may be their worst nightmare. Before we continue, if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. That way, you'll stay updated on more fascinating topics like the one we're diving into today. Let's explore the world of narcissists and the consequences that await them when their manipulative tactics no longer work. The first step to understanding the narcissist is recognizing what narcissism really is. At its core, narcissism is not just arrogance. It's a deeply rooted insecurity masked by an exaggerated sense of self-worth. Narcissists feel an intense need for admiration from others, and they constantly seek validation to maintain their inflated self-image. They are driven by an insatiable hunger for power, attention, and recognition. But what happens when they can no longer manipulate others or control their environment? What happens when they can no longer feed their ego? As narcissists grow older, they begin to face the inevitable consequences of a life spent manipulating others. Their charm, which once captivated people, starts to fade. The social circle that once provided them with constant validation begins to dwindle. People grow tired of the narcissist's demands and self-absorption. The narcissist, who once thrived on praise and admiration, begins to experience a deep sense of loneliness and emptiness. This marks the beginning of what can only be described as a slow, painful decline. As they age, their physical appearance deteriorates, their influence over others wanes, and they are forced to confront the terrifying reality of their own insignificance. This is when the true curse begins. For the narcissist, the prospect of being forgotten, irrelevant, and unloved is worse than death itself. The curse, the collapse of the narcissist's world. The concept of a curse awaiting narcissists at the end of their lives isn't about divine retribution in a traditional or religious sense. Instead, it represents the inevitable consequence of a lifetime spent feeding an inflated ego while disregarding the emotional and psychological needs of those around them. Narcissists live in a constant state of inner turmoil, perpetually balancing their insatiable need for admiration with a deep, almost crippling fear of rejection. This delicate balance requires them to maintain an image of perfection, control, and superiority, creating an artificial reality where they are always placed on a pedestal, where they are consistently admired and revered, and where they can exert power over others. But as time progresses, the walls of this constructed world begin to crack and crumble, revealing the emptiness that lies beneath. The narcissist's entire existence is built upon fragile and unstable foundations. At the core of their identity is a dependence on external validation. They rely on the praise and admiration of others to reinforce their sense of self-worth. This constant external feedback becomes a vital lifeline, and without it, the narcissist's sense of identity begins to falter. As they age or as their external circumstances change, the narcissist's ability to command the same level of admiration, influence, or control begins to diminish. The validation that once sustained them starts to dissipate, and with it, the cracks in their carefully constructed facade become ever more apparent. The emptiness that emerges when admiration and validation are no longer forthcoming is often felt in profound ways. The narcissist, who once could rely on superficial relationships and fleeting moments of praise, begins to feel increasingly hollow and exposed. Their wealth, their social status, and the material possessions they have accumulated over the years no longer seem to hold the same significance or power they once did. These external markers of success become meaningless in the face of their growing isolation. They may still try to surround themselves with sycophants or manipulate those around them to fill the void, but these attempts are usually transparent and lack the depth required to truly nourish their sense of self. Without the ability to manipulate or charm others into providing the external validation they desperately crave, the narcissist is left with nothing but the cold, painful truth. Their entire life has been spent chasing shallow, fleeting goals that ultimately provided no lasting fulfillment. The pursuit of admiration, power, and superficial success was never truly about seeking deeper connection or meaning. It was about constructing a fragile identity built on the opinions of others. As that foundation begins to erode, the narcissist faces the harsh reality that their life has been a hollow pursuit, leaving them alone to confront the emptiness that comes from neglecting the more meaningful and lasting aspects of life. This collapse of their world, this eventual unraveling of the false self, is the ultimate curse for narcissists. It's not a punishment imposed by an external force or divine power, but rather the natural outcome of a life lived in constant pursuit of admiration, control, and superficial validation. For the narcissist, the crumbling of their constructed reality marks the end of the illusion that they are invulnerable and untouchable. What is left behind is an empty shell, a person who must now face the consequences of a life spent prioritizing ego and external approval over genuine human connection and personal growth. The truth is that, when their need for admiration goes unmet, the narcissist is left to grapple with the hollowness of their existence, and there is no escaping the painful realization that their life has been fundamentally misdirected. Narcissists and the fear of abandonment. For a narcissist, one of the most deeply rooted and terrifying fears is the fear of abandonment. From an early age, narcissists seek out relationships that revolve around them, surrounding themselves with people who constantly feed their ego, friends, family, colleagues, and acquaintances who offer admiration, attention, and validation. These relationships, however, are rarely balanced or mutual. Instead, they are one-sided, with the narcissist taking far more than they give. The narcissist craves constant reinforcement of their superiority, and as long as they are able to maintain this dynamic, they feel secure in their sense of self-worth. The more they receive, the more they feel validated in their inflated self-image. However, as time passes and the narcissist grows older, these relationships often begin to deteriorate. The people who once admired and catered to them start to tire of the narcissist's incessant self-centeredness, manipulation, and lack of genuine empathy. Eventually, the narcissist's behavior becomes exhausting to those around them. Friends and family begin to distance themselves, unable or unwilling to continue feeding the narcissist's insatiable need for attention and admiration. This gradual withdrawal is often perceived by the narcissist as a betrayal, and the sense of abandonment becomes a crushing blow to their fragile ego. The fear of being abandoned is particularly devastating for the narcissist because it forces them to confront the truth that their sense of self-worth is entirely dependent on the approval of others. Without the constant flow of admiration and attention, the narcissist begins to spiral into deep emotional despair. They are overwhelmed by the fear of being forgotten, ignored, or rendered irrelevant. The narcissist has spent their life constructing an image of grandeur and superiority, a persona that relies on the adoration and validation of those around them. When that validation begins to fade, it feels as though their entire sense of self is unraveling. In their final years, when they can no longer rely on charm, manipulation, or their physical appearance to maintain their hold over others, the narcissist is forced to confront an even harsher reality. They are alone. The once glorious image they carefully crafted and maintained over their lifetime is no longer sustainable. The admiration they once commanded is a distant memory, and with it, their sense of power and importance slips away. The wealth, status, and material accomplishments that once defined them suddenly seem meaningless. These external markers of success lose their significance when there is no one left to acknowledge them, no one left to affirm their worth. For the narcissist, this is a form of existential reckoning. They may try to manipulate or charm others into providing them with the admiration they so desperately need, but this becomes increasingly ineffective as time goes on. People, having grown tired of the narcissist's endless demands, withdraw even further. What is left for the narcissist is an overwhelming sense of loneliness and abandonment, magnified by the realization that their life has been spent building a facade based on the approval of others. The narcissist may try to fill the void with material possessions, status, or fleeting relationships, but none of these things can replace the admiration they crave. And in the end, they are forced to face the reality that they are not as important, not as powerful, and not as loved as they once believed. This intense fear of abandonment and the emotional devastation that follows serves as a constant reminder of the fragility of the narcissist's sense of self. The more they rely on external validation, the more vulnerable they become to the eventual collapse of that validation. As they age and lose the ability to manipulate or charm others into offering them the admiration they seek, the narcissist is left with the painful truth. They are alone in a world that no longer sees them as special or unique. The loneliness of the narcissist. Perhaps one of the most profound and devastating curses that narcissists face as they grow older is the overwhelming sense of loneliness that sets in. Narcissists are not inherently incapable of forming relationships, but the relationships they cultivate are often superficial and self-serving. At the core, these relationships are transactional, built on the narcissist's need for validation, admiration, and constant reinforcement of their inflated self-image. They seek out people who can affirm their superiority, provide the attention they crave, and prop up the facade they've carefully constructed. However, these relationships are rarely built on mutual respect, love, or understanding. They are typically shallow, existing to feed the narcissist's ego rather than foster genuine human connection. As the narcissist ages, the cracks in these relationships start to become more apparent. The people who once readily offered praise and validation begin to tire of the narcissist's incessant need for admiration. Over time, those who initially indulged the narcissist's ego start to withdraw, either because they've grown weary of the one-sided nature of the relationship, or because they are no longer willing to play the role of the narcissist's emotional fuel. Friends, family, and colleagues begin to distance themselves as the narcissist's behavior becomes increasingly exhausting, manipulative, or self-centered. This gradual breakdown of relationships leaves the narcissist in a position where they find themselves more and more isolated. No amount of wealth, power, or fame can fill the void that results from a lack of genuine human connection. The external accolades and superficial success they may have accumulated over the years suddenly seem hollow in the absence of meaningful, emotionally fulfilling relationships. In their later years, the narcissist may attempt to surround themselves with sycophants, individuals who flatter them, feed their ego, and provide the validation they are so desperately seeking. These relationships may seem to offer some temporary relief, but they are ultimately hollow and unsatisfying. The narcissist is unable to form true connections because, at their core, they lack the empathy and emotional depth necessary to engage in authentic relationships. Their interactions are often manipulative, designed to serve their own needs, rather than being based on mutual care and understanding. The narcissist may find people who are willing to fawn over them, but these relationships are transactional, not genuine. The narcissist may enjoy the admiration for a time, but they are unable to experience the true intimacy that comes with emotionally deep and reciprocal relationships. As the narcissist's support network continues to erode, and as their ability to manipulate and charm others diminishes with age, they are left to face their greatest fear, being truly alone. The loneliness that takes root is not just a temporary or passing feeling, but a profound isolation that cuts to the core of their being. For the narcissist, being alone means confronting the painful reality that their entire life has been spent building a self-image based on external validation. The admiration and praise they once received have faded, leaving them with little more than the recognition of their own emptiness. The realization that they have no one left to turn to, no one who truly cares for them, and no one who sees them as anything other than a hollow shell of the person they once were, can be a devastating blow. The loneliness of the narcissist is compounded by their inability to understand or process the emotional needs of others. They have spent their lives trying to manipulate people to serve their own purposes, but they have neglected the deeper emotional connections that make relationships meaningful. The narcissist may yearn for companionship or recognition, but they lack the tools to cultivate the kind of connections that would offer real fulfillment. As their relationships disintegrate and their social circle shrinks, they are forced to confront the painful truth that no amount of superficial success can replace the emotional intimacy they so desperately lack. The loneliness they experience is not just the absence of people, but the absence of real, authentic emotional bonds. And as time goes on, it becomes increasingly clear to the narcissist that the very thing they have spent their life avoiding, genuine emotional vulnerability and connection, was the one thing they needed all along. Now, faced with the deep isolation they have created for themselves, the narcissist is left to grapple with the emptiness that remains. Divine retribution, a higher power's judgment. While the curse that narcissists face at the end of their lives is primarily a psychological one, rooted in emotional isolation and the crumbling of their constructed self-image, there are some who believe that there is a form of divine judgment awaiting those who have lived lives filled with cruelty, selfishness, and disregard for others. For these individuals, the consequences of living a life of manipulation and emotional harm could be viewed as a form of divine retribution or karmic justice. Whether or not one subscribes to the idea of divine punishment, it is difficult to ignore the profound sense of justice that arises when considering the narcissist's inevitable downfall, an eventual reckoning where they must face the consequences of their actions. This reckoning may manifest in the form of judgment in the afterlife or through some other metaphysical process, depending on one's spiritual beliefs. From a religious or spiritual standpoint, many traditions teach that those who live their lives without empathy, who manipulate others for their own gain, and who engage in harmful behaviors without concern for the well-being of others, will eventually face the consequences of their actions. In various religious teachings, there is a common thread that suggests that individuals who fail to live with compassion and integrity will be held accountable for their behavior, either in this life or in some form of existence beyond death. For narcissists, this belief in divine retribution implies that their actions of selfishness, manipulation, and emotional neglect will not go unpunished. Some traditions hold that after death, a person's soul will undergo judgment, where their deeds will be weighed, and their actions will be scrutinized in light of the values of empathy, kindness, and selflessness. For the narcissist, the idea of facing divine retribution can be a chilling one. The very traits that define them, selfishness, cruelty, and a lack of regard for others, are precisely the qualities that many believe will lead to their downfall, whether in this life or the next. The concept of judgment is often framed as a cosmic or divine balancing of scales, where a person's actions are weighed against the impact they have had on others. For those who have lived a life of manipulation and egotism, this idea of judgment serves as a stark reminder that there are consequences for living a life that is entirely self-centered and devoid of compassion. In many religious traditions, the afterlife is portrayed as a place where individuals must account for their actions and are judged accordingly. The narcissist's disregard for others and their constant pursuit of self-glorification may be seen as a failure to live in accordance with the moral and ethical standards of the universe. In this view, the narcissist's punishment could involve being confronted with the harm they've caused or facing a form of isolation or suffering that mirrors the emotional isolation they imposed on others throughout their lives. The narcissist's inability to form genuine, meaningful connections with others, something that is seen as a core component of spiritual growth in many traditions, could be viewed as a form of divine justice. In this way, the narcissist's descent into isolation and despair may not only be a psychological fate, but also a reflection of a greater cosmic law of cause and effect. Even for those who do not hold religious or spiritual beliefs, the idea of karmic justice, the notion that the energy a person puts into the world will eventually come back to them, can serve as a form of retribution for the narcissist. Their actions, often rooted in manipulation, deceit, and a lack of genuine empathy, are believed to create a ripple effect that eventually turns inward, causing the narcissist to experience the same emptiness and alienation they've imposed on others. This karmic perspective suggests that the narcissist's behavior will ultimately backfire, and they will be forced to face the emotional void they've created for themselves. Whether one believes in a divine higher power, karmic justice, or the natural consequences of selfish behavior, it is clear that the narcissist's inability to form authentic, meaningful relationships and their eventual isolation can be seen as a form of cosmic justice. Their selfishness, their disregard for others, and their inability to truly connect are all behaviors that, in the end, may lead them to face a profound form of loneliness and despair that serves as a fitting consequence for a life lived without empathy or genuine care for others. In the eyes of many, this ultimate isolation is the retribution they deserve, a reflection of their actions and the life they chose to lead. However, even without the concept of divine judgment, the narcissist's end is still a tragic one. They will inevitably face the reality of their actions, as their ability to manipulate others fades, and they are left to confront the loneliness and emptiness they have created for themselves. The end of the narcissist, a life of isolation and irrelevance. In the end, the narcissist will find themselves alone in a world that no longer cares for them. Their influence has waned, their image has crumbled, and their once glorious self-image is nothing more than a distant memory. This is the ultimate curse for the narcissist, the loss of everything they have worked for. They will realize too late that the power, admiration, and control they sought so desperately were fleeting and meaningless. For the narcissist, the greatest fear is being forgotten. They crave attention, they crave admiration, and they crave validation. But in the end, they will face the stark reality that no one cares, no one remembers, and their legacy is nothing but a hollow shell. Thank you for staying with us as we explored the fate of narcissists and the potential consequences they face at the end of their lives. Whether or not you believe in divine retribution, it's clear that the narcissist's life is one marked by isolation, fear, and emptiness. The curse for narcissists is not one of punishment by an external force, but rather the natural result of their behavior. A life spent seeking validation, only to find that it was never truly fulfilling. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share this video with others who might find it valuable, and stay tuned for more content that delves into the complexities of human behavior and relationships. Until next time, take care of yourselves and those around you.